The first thing Dr. Lyra Quell noticed when the cell door slammed shut was that familiar smell of recycled air, blended with the subtle undertone of despair. Welcome to Bastion-7, the galactic pit stop for the galaxy's least wanted. If space was the final frontier, then this hellhole was its dodgy back alley. Lyra, a woman who once toyed with the ambitious dream of human evolution, now found herself trapped in this orbiting fortress because she dared to say humans could be more than just fleshy bags of mostly water. Apparently, that was a bit too radical for the Board of Ethics. Toe the line or get shoved over it, she muttered to herself, the irony of her own situation dripping from her words like acid. The cell wasn't much to look at, unless you had a thing for gray steel and more gray steel. Her bunk could generously be described as unwelcoming, and the view out of her tiny porthole showed the endless black of space. No comforting stars, just the nothingness that reminded you daily of your insignificant place in the universe. "Hey, new meat," a voice called from the other side of the bars. Lyra turned, raising an eyebrow at the guard, whose face sported a patchwork of scars that could have been a map to somewhere awful. "You're the doc, right? The one who thinks we're all gonna grow gills and fly." "That was the basic gist," Lyra replied, her tone as dry as the atmosphere of Mars. "But it seems like I'm more likely to rot here before that happens," the guard chuckled. "Just try not to get sick, all right. We're fresh out of miracle cures and the last doc didn't do so well." He pointed a thumb down the hall where another cell door stood open, conspicuously empty. "Let me guess, he caught a bad case of shiv in the back," Lyra smirked, though she was already mulling over the implications. She hadn't been here long, but word traveled fast, even in isolation. Rumors bubbled through the prison like swamp gas, stinking up the air with whispers of mysterious ailments and inexplicable deaths. "Something like that," the guard winked, though there was no humor in his eyes. "Welcome to Bastion-7, where the air is thick and the chances of survival are thin." "Sounds like home," Lyra said, doing her best to hide the disquiet stirring in her gut. This place didn't just chew people up. It ground them into whatever passed for dust out here. The next morning, she was guided through the cramped corridors of the penal station, every screech of the metal floors resonating the song of her new existence. The other inmates watched her with a mix of curiosity and pity, the seasoned ones already clocking her as a fresh arrival. "See anything you like?" she snapped at a particularly leering face. "Nah," came the reply, "but I didn't expect much from the geeks anyway." Lyra just shook her head. The only thing worse than being incarcerated with the galaxy's worst was being incarcerated with the galaxy's dumbest. But that wasn't entirely fair. There were some sharp minds here, buried under layers of cynicism and self-preservation. She arrived at the mess hall, a grand term for what was essentially a tin can with tables. The food was, well, it was food if you squinted and turned off your taste buds. She grabbed a tray and found a corner to observe the spectacle of human survival. It didn't take long to see the signs. A cough here, a pallor there, inmates clutching their sides or shaking their heads as if trying to dislodge something unpleasant. Something was definitely off, and Lyra's scientific mind couldn't help but tick over the possibilities. It had the air of a classic pathogen outbreak, minus the usual fanfare of alarms and medical teams. In Bastion-7, you either toughed it out or became part of the ground-up daycare. She was halfway through the mystery slop that was apparently lunch when a man dropped to the floor 2 tables over, convulsing like he'd been hit with a cattle prod. "Looks like Barry's having one of his episodes," someone remarked casually, not even bothering to look up. "Stomach flu or alien curse?" Lyra asked, pretending the spoonful of paste she was holding had any flavor. "Depends on who you ask," the man across from her replied, scratching at his arm. "Me, I reckon it's just the chef's special sauce. Either that or we're all about to star in our very own sci-fi horror flick," she mused, watching as Barry was carted away by equally dispassionate guards. "Do we vote on who gets eaten first?" "Nah, this place ain't got that kind of democracy," her table mate replied. "It's more of a survival of the unfittest scenario," Lyra chuckled. Just my kind of luck. Back in her cell, she tried to piece together what little she'd seen and heard. It wasn't much, but her gut told her something was festering here. An alien pathogen, some sort of weaponized virus, or just good old-fashioned negligence. The options danced in her mind, none of them particularly comforting. The next day, more prisoners seemed under the weather, and not just from the food. Lyra observed a woman opposite her in the mess, her spoon shaking as if she were trying to perform spoon ballet. Another man was scratching at his skin like he was trying to dig his way out. "Hey, Doc," came a voice from the side. It was the guard from before, looking more serious than usual. "You mind taking a look at something?" She followed him down the hall, the air getting thicker with every step. They stopped at a cell where a man lay on the floor, eyes wide and vacant. He was breathing, but only just. "He's been like this since last night," the guard said, scratching his head. "We figured it was withdrawal or something, but it's getting worse." Lyra stepped inside, kneeling beside the man. Up close, she could see the veins under his skin, dark and pulsing like something alive. "This isn't withdrawal," she murmured, leaning closer. "Feels more like something's using him as a chew toy." "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, standing up and wiping her hands on her pants, "if this is an alien thing, we're all in deep space trouble." The guard frowned. "What do we do?" "Hope it's just bad food and not the opening act of an alien invasion," she replied, heading back to the corridor. "And maybe start praying to whatever gods you believe in, if any." But Lyra wasn't the praying type. No, she was the figure things out and hope it doesn't blow up in her face type. And right now, Bastion-7 was looking like it might just go kaboom. The days blurred together, each one a repeat of the last, each mystery illness another piece of the grim puzzle. More prisoners fell ill, some recovering with dark circles under their eyes, others not waking up at all. The guards tried to keep a lid on things, but rumors were like cockroaches, hard to kill and impossible to contain. It was during one of these interminable days that Lyra found herself face to face with Warren, one of the prison's more notorious figures. "Heard you're the brains around here," he said, his voice a low growl. "What's going on?" "If I knew that, I'd be on a beach somewhere, not stuck in this orbiting misery," she replied, not bothering to hide her contempt. Warren grinned, revealing teeth that belonged in a horror movie. "I like you, Doc, you got spirit. And you've got something in your teeth," she shot back. He laughed, a sound that was more threat than amusement. "Keep your ears open, Doc. Things are about to get interesting." Lyra didn't doubt it, not for a second. Later that night, as she lay on her sorry excuse for a bed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, something that wasn't the usual surveillance drones or nosy guards. Something other. The lights flickered once, twice, and then died, plunging the station into darkness. A chorus of voices rose up, some cursing, others laughing nervously. Lyra sat up, heart pounding in her chest. Just a power glitch, she told herself, though she didn't quite believe it. Not with the sick and the dying, not with the guards whispering about things that moved in the shadows. As the emergency lights sputtered to life, casting everything in an ominous red glow, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the edge of something big, something dangerous. And in Bastion-7, there was no safety net. Lyra Quell wasn't exactly a morning person, but the sound of screams had a way of waking you up like nothing else. "Another episode," she muttered, rolling out of her bunk. If she'd had a credit for every time she heard that in this hellhole, she'd be sipping expensive cocktails in some sun-drenched paradise. Not that there were many left in the galaxy. The mess hall was a circus, complete with its own dying clown. A man, one she vaguely recognized as having been part of Warren's crew, was writhing on the floor, his body convulsing like it had a mind of its own. Or maybe something else had a mind of its own inside him. "Guess breakfast didn't agree with him," she said dryly to Rax Torin, who'd taken up residence next to her. Rax was the kind of resourceful that made Mac Jiver look like an amateur, a fact that probably explained why he was still alive. "I'd say it's more of a hostile takeover," Rax replied, scratching his stubbled chin. "Heard about those folks getting sick, Doc," She nodded. You could say I have a professional interest. Then you'll love this. Rax gestured at the thrashing man. Heard he was lifting crates like they were paperweights yesterday. Barely slept, barely ate, but strong as an ox. Sounds like a wonderful new gym routine, she scoffed. Side effects may include death and a complete loss of control over your own body. Yeah, the perfect regime for the masochist in all of us, Rax agreed, watching as guards finally got around to doing something useful, dragging the poor bastard away while avoiding his flailing limbs. Lyra's curiosity was piqued, though. Strength, endurance, and now a one-man freak show on the floor. She needed a closer look at what was going on, and not just from the confines of her cell or the rumors wafting through the air like the stench of bad decisions. Think you can get me a look at one of these cases? She asked Rax, knowing his connections ran deeper than the hygiene of most inmates. He gave her a sideways glance, more calculating than curious. What's in it for me, Doc? How about not ending up like Twinkle Toes over there? She shot back. If this spreads, we're all in deep shit, and I'm not talking the usual kind. Rax considered, then nodded. All right, I'll see what I can do. Might take a few days. Days. We've got all the time in the universe, right? Lyra smirked, though she felt that familiar flutter of urgency. A scientist's compulsion to solve the unsolvable, even in a place designed to crush hope. Later, back in her cell, Lyra couldn't shake the image of those black veins under the skin, the way they'd pulsed like something alive. The idea that something was moving inside these people, turning them into more than they were, or less, depending on how you looked at it, was both fascinating and terrifying. She needed more data, more evidence, and right now, the closest thing she had to a lab was the mess hall, the only place where people gathered long enough to be studied, if you could call their shuffling and glaring at each other a social interaction. The next meal was as uninspired as ever, but the company was shifting from wary to downright fearful. Word of the miracle man had spread faster than an STD in a zero-gravity brothel. People were whispering, and not in the usual did you hear who stabbed who kind of way. This was different. She caught snatches of conversation as she picked at her tray. Stronger than a bull. Didn't even see the knife coming. Parasite, I heard from maintenance. Parasite. The word lodged itself in her brain like a splinter, irritation and curiosity twining around it until she was desperate to know more. Parasites were nature's little freeloaders, usually content with a ride at someone else's expense, but give them a twist, turn them into something else, and you had a problem that could rewrite the rulebook on human biology. Rax slid into the seat opposite her, carrying a mug of something that was probably more toxic than the air. Managed to talk to a guard. Seems like they found something in the vents, something alive. Alive like a rat or alive like a mini-Cthulhu, she asked, raising an eyebrow. More mini-Cthulhu, less rat, Rax said. They're calling them creepers. Little bastards crawl into you and make a home. Charming, Lyra replied, pushing her food away. But why the super strength? Why the convulsions? It doesn't add up. Maybe they're trying to take over, Rax suggested, and his tone was light, but his eyes were dead serious. And failing. Or maybe they're trying to improve us, she countered, the scientist in her refusing to let go of the possibility. You ever think of that? Rax snorted. Yeah, 'cause that's just what humanity needs. An upgrade from something that crawls through air ducts and gives you the shakes. Never said evolution was pretty, she said, leaning back. But if these things are making people stronger, what's stopping them from making us smarter, faster, better, or deader? Rax pointed out, gesturing toward the guards who'd reappeared, warily eyeing the convulsing inmate they were escorting. Looks like a rapid path to the grave to me. It was a fair point. But she couldn't help but wonder if there was more to it than that, something beneath the surface antics of Bastion-7 that might hold a key to understanding. Keep your ears to the ground, Rax, she told him. I want to know everything about these creepers' habits, effects, possible weaknesses. What's in it for me? He asked again, grin splitting his face. How about staying on my good side? she offered, raising her tray like a toast. "Trust me, it's a rare commodity around here." "Deal," he said, clinking his own mug against hers. The truce was uneasy, a pact of necessity between two people who didn't have a lot of better options. But in the grim corridors of Bastion-7, it was the best you could hope for. Later, Lyra's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of cells being locked down for the night. She lay staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together the puzzle. Somewhere out there in the vast expanse of space, someone had designed these parasites, crafted them maybe, and decided to drop them off on humanity's least wanted. Whoever they were, they didn't care much for ethics. Or maybe they did, just not the same kind as the rest of this fleshy universe. Maybe it was a twisted gift, an unwanted opportunity wrapped in a layer of impending doom. "Oh, what I'd give for a microscope," she whispered to herself, the longing for her old life a dull ache she couldn't quite shake. The following days were a blur of observation and whispered conversations. More inmates fell prey to the creepers. Their symptoms varied but unmistakable. Some became hyper-aggressive, others lethargic to the point of coma. And then there were the few who seemed to thrive, muscles bulging, senses heightened. Even the guards grew wary of them. Lyra needed more than just observations. She needed a way to see these things up close. But every attempt to get near a specimen was thwarted by either official disinterest or the prisoner's own fear. No one wanted to become a science project, least of all in a place where the outcome was likely to be death. But she had an advantage, a brain that refused to stop working, even in the face of overwhelming odds. And a mind that was beginning to form a plan, one that involved a little subterfuge, a lot of daring, and more than a hint of madness. It was during one of these planning sessions, with Rax keeping watch, that she finally caught a break. An inmate, one of Warren's crew no less, came to her with an offer. "Heard you're looking into the sickness," he said, leaning casually against the bars of her cell, trying to look nonchalant but failing miserably. "You could say that," she replied, tilting her head. "What's it to you? I got something you might want to see," he said, glancing around like a kid with a stolen candy bar. "But it's gonna cost you. Everyone's got a price," she muttered. "What's yours?" "Information," he said. "You got smarts, Doc. I want a way out of here." Lyra considered it. "You think I have a magic key or something? I'm as locked up as you are." "Yeah, but you've got brains, and in this place that's worth more than muscle." "All right," she conceded, curiosity getting the better of her. "Show me what you've got." He led her to a maintenance hatch that supposedly hadn't been used in years. Inside, in a makeshift cage, was something that looked like a cross between a centipede and a nightmare, translucent, squirming, and very much alive. "Meet your creeper," the inmate said, proud as a school kid with a science fair project. Lyra leaned in, eyes wide with a mixture of horror and fascination. This was it, the thing that was causing all the chaos, and it was uglier than she'd imagined. "How'd you get it?" she asked, tearing her gaze away to look at the inmate. "Trapped it in the vents," he said. "Figured it might be worth something." "It's worth more than you know," she whispered, watching the creature squirm against its confines. "You think you can do something with it?" he asked. "I can try," she said, a slow grin spreading across her face. "And maybe, just maybe, we can figure out a way to turn this hellhole into something more than a death sentence." The inmate nodded, clearly hoping that her words would turn out to be more than just empty promises. And as she studied the creature, Lyra couldn't help but feel a flicker of excitement in her chest, the thrill of discovery, the promise of answers. The stakes were high, the risks enormous. But if she could understand this thing, maybe she could save more than just herself from the grim fate that Bastion-7 had in mind. And if not, well, at least she'd go down swinging. The mess hall had descended into full-blown chaos, a riot minus the pitchforks and torches, though given time, someone would probably invent interstellar versions of both. Lyra Quell, ever the reluctant participant in life's little dramas, found herself smack in the middle of the pandemonium. The noise was fantastic, like a herd of elephants had collectively decided to audition for the Galactic Orchestra. "Looks like everyone wants a piece of the miracle," Huh? Rax Torrens' voice cut through the din, his grin visible even from across the room. He leaned against the wall, arms folded, watching the scene unfold with the detached amusement of someone who had seen it all and then some. "Miracle my ass," Lyra snapped back, sidestepping a particularly lively inmate who seemed to be testing the theory that screaming could substitute for body armor. "This is more like a miracle gone wrong." Imagine the PR nightmare. Inmates were swarming, some displaying superhuman feats of strength, others convulsing in grotesque rhythm. The ones thriving were a sight, like watching evolution throw a drunken brawl. Lyra couldn't decide if she should be more appalled at the display or envious of the raw power. Enter the prison guards, right on cue. They stormed in, faces set in grim determination, their stun batons crackling with the promise of pain. The guards were Bastion-7's version of pest control, though Lyra figured they'd need a hell of a lot more than that to handle this mess. "Guess they think a few shocks will bring order," Rax mused, ducking as a chair flew overhead. "Or maybe they just enjoy zapping people. Who's to say?" "Yeah, 'cause nothing says crowd control like electrocuting your way to peace," Lyra retorted, rolling her eyes. The guards lined up, forming a human barricade between the inmates and the exits. The head guard, Scarface, as Lyra had dubbed him, stepped forward, barking orders with the kind of authoritarian gusto that would make a dictator proud. "Settle down, you lot," he yelled, his voice echoing around the metal room. "Anyone caught with those things inside them will be quarantined indefinitely. Quarantined or just quietly disposed of," Lyra whispered to Rax. "Who's taking bets?" "Depends on the odds," Rax replied, watching as the guards began to drag the more afflicted inmates away. Those who were still lucid scrambled backward, fear etched into their faces. "Seems like they're not here for the hugs and therapy sessions," Lyra observed, her gaze following Scarface. The guard's eyes landed on her and she fought the urge to flinch. "Quell," he called, voice dripping with disdain. "Heard you're sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." "Old habits die hard," she shot back, crossing her arms. "You heard wrong. I'm just looking for a way to not share a cell with a living nightmare." "Charming," Scarface sneered. "But if I find out you're meddling, you'll end up in solitary faster than you can say parasitic infestation." "Oh, promises, promises," she replied, watching as he moved on, presumably to intimidate someone with less of a mouth. When the guards had finally cleared out, dragging the writhing and convulsing prisoners with them, the mess hall settled into a tense quiet. Lyra and Rax exchanged glances, the unsaid understood between them. Things were spiraling, and fast. So, evolutionarily challenged centipedes are turning the prison into a circus, and the guards are ready to lock up anyone who sneezes wrong. "Got any bright ideas?" Rax asked, settling into a chair that still had all its legs. "I might," Lyra said, her mind churning through potential solutions like a slightly malfunctioning data processor. "We need to figure out what triggers the creepers, what makes some people turn into Hulk while others become ragdolls." "Sounds simple enough," Rax shrugged. "Just crack the code of an alien parasite with a few household items." "Exactly," she replied, pretending to ignore the sarcasm. "We need a lab," Rax raised an eyebrow. "A lab in Bastion-7. Sure, Doc, let me just fetch my science kit from the non-existent storage closet." "I'm serious," Lyra insisted. "We need to get a closer look at these things. Figure out how they work, what makes them tick or crawl." "Okay, say you managed to MacGyver a lab together," Rax said, leaning forward. "How do we keep the guards from busting in and turning our research project into a reason to decorate the solitary cells?" "Leave that to me," Lyra replied. "I've got a few tricks up my sleeve. Just need you to acquire some supplies." "Ah, back to what's in it for me," Rax smirked. "How about a front row seat to the greatest show in the galaxy?" she offered. "The transformation of Bastion-7's inmates into something more than just meat bags with bad attitudes." Rax chuckled, a low sound that was more amusement than humor. "You've got yourself a deal, Quell. But if this blows up in our faces, I'm blaming you." "Fair enough," she said, shaking his hand. "Now let's go play mad scientist." The plan was simple enough in theory. Scrounge together whatever equipment they could find, anything remotely useful from broken tablets to scrap metal, and assemble a makeshift lab in one of the unused maintenance shafts. The hard part was doing it without drawing attention. Rax worked his magic, pulling strings and calling in favors faster than Lyra could count. Within a few days, they had the essentials: a couple of dissected comm devices, a hacked surveillance drone, and a collection of tools that looked like they belonged in a torture chamber rather than a lab. "Not exactly state-of-the-art," Rax commented, surveying their collection with a critical eye. "Well, we're not exactly the state," Lyra replied, setting up her makeshift workstation. "But it'll do. It's about time we figured out what makes these creepers so special." With her tools laid out, Lyra carefully placed the captured parasite in a small containment unit, a clear box she could observe while keeping the creature from scuttling off into someone else's nightmares. "All right, little guy," she murmured, peering down at the creeper. "Let's see what makes you tick. Tick or explode," Rax quipped from his spot by the entrance, keeping watch for any unwanted guests. "You know, just in case." Ior's passed intense concentration as Lyra examined the creature, taking notes and making observations. The way it moved, the way it reacted to stimuli, every detail was crucial. "What do you see?" Rax asked at one point, curiosity getting the better of him. Lyra squinted, adjusting her makeshift magnification lens over the box. "It's odd, like it's programmed to enhance the host. But why the convulsions? Why the aggression in some, lethargy in others?" "Maybe it's a compatibility issue," Rax suggested. "Like trying to run a new operating system on outdated hardware." "Not a bad analogy," she mused. "But there's more. Look at this." She pointed to a small, almost imperceptible bulge at the creature's center. "Could be a gland, maybe something that releases chemicals to interact with human biology." "So you're saying these bugs are like high-tech steroids?" Rax asked, eyebrows raised. "In a sense," Lyra nodded. "But more unpredictable. It's like handing a toddler a blaster and hoping for the best." "Sounds like a recipe for disaster," Rax remarked. "Tell me about it," she sighed, rubbing her temples. "We need to find a way to counteract the effects, or at least stabilize them. Maybe we can reverse engineer whatever mechanism is causing the chaos." "And if we can't?" Rax asked, leaning against the wall. "Then we figure out how to survive the fallout," Lyra replied, her expression grim. At that moment, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Lyra and Rax exchanged a glance, hearts pounding as they prepared for the worst. "Looks like we've got company," Rax whispered, positioning himself between Lyra and the door. The footsteps grew closer, and Lyra could make out the distinct clang of boots against metal. Scarface and his entourage of guards emerged, eyes scanning the area with practiced intensity. "Quell Torin," Scarface called, his voice carrying a tone of authority that grated on Lyra's nerves. "What are you doing down here?" "Just a little science experiment," Lyra replied, forcing a smile. "You know, in the spirit of discovery." Scarface's gaze landed on the containment unit, his expression unreadable. "You know the rules," he said. "Unauthorized tampering with prison property is prohibited." "Property?" Lyra echoed, incredulous. "These things are killing us and you're worried about property rights." "I'm worried about order," Scarface shot back. "And you're disrupting it." "We're trying to figure out how to stop this madness," Rax interjected, stepping forward. "Or at least control it." Scarface considered this, his eyes narrowing. "And you think you can do that?" "Given the right tools, maybe," Lyra replied, her tone defiant. "But not if we're stuck dodging guards every step of the way." There was a long pause as Scarface weighed his options. Finally, he sighed, running a hand over his scarred face. "Fine," he said reluctantly. "You can continue your research. But step out of line and you'll wish you hadn't." "Understood," Lyra nodded, a mix of relief and determination washing over her. The guards retreated, leaving Lyra and Rax alone once more. As the echo of their footsteps faded, Rax let out a low whistle. "That was close." "Too close," Lyra agreed, turning back to her work. But at least we have a little breathing room now. Breathing room for what? Rax asked, watching as she resumed her examination of the creeper. For finding a solution, Lyra replied, her voice filled with quiet resolve. Before this place really goes to hell. And so they worked under the shadow of a ticking clock, knowing that whatever answers they found could mean the difference between salvation and destruction. Or, as Rax liked to put it, between a slightly improved death and a really messy one. Commander Jax Oriental stood at the helm of the command center, a place that felt more like the galaxy's most depressing aquarium than a nerve center for a floating fortress. The walls were a dull gray, punctuated by blinking lights that screamed dysfunctional. He surveyed his realm with a look of resigned contempt, like a parent at a school play featuring only their least favorite child. "Order," he muttered, more to himself than to any of the bumbling minions scuttling around the room. "We need order." Scarface, his right-hand thug whose creativity was limited to finding new ways to look menacing, loomed beside him. "Sir, the inmates are getting restless," Scarface offered, as if the sight of convulsing prisoners wasn't enough of a clue. "We might need to step up containment measures." "Containment?" Oriental snorted. "Containment's a fairy tale we tell ourselves here, Scarface. We've got parasites turning prisoners into some kind of Hulk ragdoll hybrids. What's next? Unicorns and rainbows." Scarface gave a grunt that could either be agreement or indigestion. "Should we deploy more stun batons?" Oriental leaned back in his chair, contemplating the galaxy's most unwanted population under his begrudging care. "That's great for crowd control, less effective for an evolving epidemic. I want solutions, not just riot gear. Hell, if I wanted chaos, I'd have stayed at my sister's last Christmas." Meanwhile, in the underbelly of Bastion-7, Lyra and Rax were busy playing mad scientists with the enthusiasm of two kids with a chemistry set. Only this chemistry set had a penchant for creating disasters, not discoveries. "Okay, new plan," Lyra said, adjusting the makeshift lab equipment that was one cheap spark away from blowing up in their faces. "We harness the parasite's abilities." "You're suggesting we weaponize convulsions?" Rax asked, scratching his chin. "Because I've seen that trick. It's called a mosh pit." Lyra smirked despite herself. "No, we control the enhancements, boost strength and endurance on command. Turn this prison into our ticket off this rock. A prison break, nice, but what about the side effects? Like, oh, I don't know, dying." Rax raised an eyebrow. "Minor details," she waved off. "We'll work on those. Besides, when has a little risk ever stopped you?" "Touché," Rax admitted. "All right, I'm in, but how do we keep this quiet? One wrong move and we'll have Scarface breathing down our necks faster than you can say electric shock therapy." Lyra tapped her chin, considering. "We need to find out who's been tipping them off. Someone's been blabbing and we need to shut them up before they shut us down." "Great," Rax said. "A mole hunt, just what I needed." They didn't have to look far. In a place like Bastion-7, secrets were about as secure as a toddler's diary. Within Iors, whispers led them to Twitchy Jor, a small-time snitch with an unfortunate nickname and an unfortunate tendency to owe everyone on Bastion-7 something. They found him cowering in a corner of the mess hall, trying to look invisible amidst the chaos. Rax grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, hauling him to a more private corner. "Hey, Twitchy," Lyra said, voice saccharine sweet. "We hear you've been talkative." Jor, whose face was a patchwork quilt of bruises and bad decisions, trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. I don't know what you're talking about." "See, that's the problem," Rax said, leaning in. "We think you do." Lyra crossed her arms, fixing him with a look that could melt steel. "You want to stay on our good side, Jor. Believe me, it's the winning side." Jor swallowed hard, eyes darting around for an escape that didn't exist. All right, I might have mentioned something to Scarface." Rax rolled his eyes. "Might have. Jor, if you were any more of a sieve, we'd use you to drain pasta. Just don't hurt me," Jor pleaded, his voice barely a squeak now. "I only told him you were poking around. I didn't think he'd care." Lyra leaned back, considering. "What else have you told him?" "Nothing, I swear." Jor's voice hit a new pitch, suitable only for glassware and dogs. "Good," Rax said. "Keep it that way. You owe us now, Twitchy, and believe me, we collect." With Twitchy suitably cowed and unlikely to spill more beans to Scarface, Lyra and Rax returned to their makeshift lab. The clock was ticking and they had promises to keep. As promised, Twitchy kept his mouth shut, and the inmates began to notice something was up. Lyra's experiments, crude as they were, started to yield results. Controlled doses of the parasite's enhancements were given to a select few, enough to test, not enough to kill. Yet, "Feels like I'm on fire," inmate Gruff mumbled, flexing his arm and marveling at the newfound strength. "But in a good way." "Great," Lyra said dryly. "We're aiming for good combustions here," Rax observed, arms crossed. "So far, so good. Nobody's exploded." Yet Gruff grinned, a feral smile that would give nightmares to anyone sensible. "This is some high-grade stuff. I could take on the whole guard." "Let's not test that theory," Rax interjected. "Yet." But it seemed not everyone was a fan of burgeoning freedom, not when it threatened their own small fiefdoms. In a place like Bastion-7, power was a currency, and the guards weren't going to let it slip away without a fight. Commander Oriental, meanwhile, sat in his office, nursing a drink that was more engine fluid than alcohol. The reports were coming in, each one more dire than the last. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion, only if the train was full of dangerous criminals and the tracks were made of the commander's dignity. "Sir," Scarface interrupted his brooding with all the grace of a brick through a window. "We've noticed some activity among the inmates. Unusual strength." Oriental sighed, rubbing his temples. "Just what I need, more trouble." Scarface nodded, his expression unreadable. "Permission to deploy additional security measures." "Fine," Oriental huffed. "But keep it contained. Last thing we need is this turning into a galactic news story." "I can see the headlines now. Bastion-7, the worst space getaway since Pluto." Scarface left, and Oriental was alone with his thoughts, which was a dangerous place to be. He needed to act, and fast. Back in the underbelly, Lyra and Rax were making progress, albeit the kind that could get them killed. They needed to act before their luck ran out, which, judging by past experience, was any minute now. "We need to make our move," Lyra said, her voice hushed as they sat in their makeshift lab. "The window's closing. We've got the strength part down, but we need a plan," Rax countered. "And it needs to be good." "How about we start a riot?" Gruff suggested, the enthusiasm of a man who'd never met a problem he couldn't punch. Lyra shook her head. "We need a distraction, not a war zone. Something that'll keep the guards busy while we slip out." Rax tapped his chin, thinking. "What about the control center? We take that, we take the prison." "Bold," Lyra admitted. "Insanely risky, but bold." "Got a better idea?" Rax challenged. She didn't, and they both knew it. So they began to plan the unthinkable, a coup on Bastion-7. As they put the finishing touches on their plan, it became clear something wasn't right. The guards were on edge, more so than usual. Scarface was seen pacing, a man on a mission, and it didn't take a genius to figure out they'd caught wind of something. "Jor," Lyra muttered, the name a curse. "He's talking again." "Figures," Rax said, resigned. "Looks like our mole decided to dig a little deeper." "We need to move now," Lyra insisted, "before they come down on us like a ton of bricks." As they prepared to put their plan into motion, the distinct sound of alarms blaring filled the air. The time for stealth was over, replaced by the chaos of a full-scale uprising. "This is it," Lyra said, heart pounding. "We either make it out of here or we don't make it at all." With adrenaline fueling their movements, Lyra, Rax, and their small band of enhanced inmates made their way towards the control center. The corridors were a flurry of activity, guards scrambling like ants in a colony that had just been kicked. "Let's do this," Rax grinned, the thrill of the fight lighting up his eyes. They burst into the control center, a whirlwind of motion and chaos. Guards were taken down with a speed and efficiency that was almost poetic, if your idea of poetry involved broken bones and swift punches. Oriental, watching from the sidelines, could do little but stare as his carefully constructed world crumbled around him. "Well," he muttered, sipping his drink. "Guess this is why they pay me the big bucks." Scarface, on the other hand, wasn't going down without a fight. He charged at Rax, stun baton crackling, only to be met with a swift kick that sent him sprawling. "Not today," Rax quipped, stepping over him as he moved to secure the controls. Lyra worked frantically at the control panel, her fingers a blur as she reprogrammed the system. "Almost there," she called, heart racing. And then just like that it was over. The alarm ceased, the guards subdued, and the path to freedom opened before them. "Let's get the hell out of here," Rax declared, a triumphant grin on his face. Together they made their way to the ship bay, the taste of freedom sweeter than anything they'd ever known. It was a victory, albeit a temporary one. They still had a galaxy full of troubles waiting for them. But for now, they were free, and in a place like Bastion-7, that was enough. It was safe to say things were going swimmingly. In the same way a lead weight swims. The alarms blared like a migraine set to music, echoing through the corridors of Bastion-7. But Lyra Quell was in no mood to dance. Not when they were cornered in the mess hall, with guards closing in like hyenas on a wounded gazelle. It was the kind of situation you didn't get out of by asking nicely or promising to be good. Which was a shame, because Lyra was fresh out of good ideas and was seriously considering bad ones. "Any bright ideas?" Rax asked, ducking behind an overturned table as a stun baton zapped the air above his head. "You mean besides die quickly?" Lyra snapped, peeking over the table. The guards were advancing in their riot gear, faces hidden behind visors that didn't do much to hide their intentions. "Yeah, I've got nothing," Rax chuckled. "Good to know we're on the same page." Gruff, their enthusiastic if not overly bright recruit, was busy flexing his enhanced muscles like a kid showing off his new toy. "I can take them, you know. Just say the word." "Later, Conan," Lyra said, pulling him back down. "We need a plan, not a bodybuilding contest." The guards weren't exactly giving them time to brainstorm. Each zap of a stun baton was a reminder that their time was running out faster than a politician from a promise. As they huddled behind their makeshift barricade, Lyra's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. "Think, Lyra, think," she muttered to herself, her brain a whirl of adrenaline and panic. Then amid the chaos an idea struck her like a rogue asteroid. "The parasites," she said, her voice barely audible over the din. "What about them?" Rax asked, glancing sideways at her. Lyra grinned, an idea taking form. "We've been focusing on their strengths, but every strength has a weakness. We just need to find it. And how do you propose we do that exactly?" Rax ducked as another baton sent sparks flying. Lyra's grin widened. "We tinker with the enhancements, push them to their limit and see what breaks first." Rax gave a low whistle. "You know, I always thought your genius was more mad scientist than actual scientist." "Madness is just science in a hurry," she shot back, her eyes alight with a spark of hope. "We just need to hold them off long enough." Gruff looked at them both like they'd lost their minds. "You're gonna play with the bugs now of all times." "Got a better idea?" Lyra challenged, raising an eyebrow. The answer, of course, was no. So they set to work, cobbling together the means to overclock the parasites. Rax kept the guards at bay, trading banter with them like a seasoned boxer taunting an opponent. Gruff, meanwhile, provided the muscle, his brute strength a deterrent to any guard looking to close the gap. Minutes felt like hours as Lyra worked, her fingers flying over the makeshift setup. The hum of the machinery was a lullaby of impending doom, each beep and click a step closer to either salvation or a spectacularly messy death. "Almost there," she muttered, her eyes focused on the readouts. "Just a bit more juice and we'll see what these things are really made of." Rax glanced over, his face a mix of skepticism and trust. "You sure about this?" "I didn't sign up to become a parasite casserole. Would you rather surrender?" Lyra asked, her voice dry as a desert. "Fair point," Rax conceded, turning his attention back to the guards, who were beginning to look less certain about their chances. Then it happened. A flicker, a spark, and the machinery whined like a protester being dragged away. The parasites, pushed to their limit, reacted in a way Lyra hadn't predicted. The inmates infused with them began to convulse, their bodies twitching like marionettes with a drunk puppeteer. I think we overdid it," Gruff said, his voice tinged with awe and fear. But as quickly as the seizures started, they stopped. The inmates stood, visibly changed, their movements more fluid, more controlled. And there was something else, a newfound vulnerability in the parasites, a chink in their proverbial armor. "That's it," Lyra breathed, a grin spreading across her face. "We can control them." Rax gave a short laugh, half relief, half disbelief. "Now we just have to survive long enough to use it." The guards, sensing a shift in the tide, hesitated. It was all the opening Lyra needed. "Time to put on the show," she declared. With newfound purpose, they charged. Gruff was the first into the fray, his powered-up form a blur of motion. He moved like a freight train with delusions of grandeur, crashing into guards with the kind of force you usually reserved for natural disasters. Lyra and Rax followed, using their newfound knowledge to coordinate their attacks. The guards, unprepared for the sudden turn, fell back, their formation crumbling under the assault. In the chaos, a sliver of doubt wormed its way into Commander Oriental's mind. Watching through the security feed, he saw his well-laid plans unravel. It was like watching a soap opera where everyone died at the end. He drained his glass, contemplating the merits of early retirement. Scarface, ever the optimistic brute, was less philosophical. "We've got them where we want them, sir," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Oriental snorted. "If by where we want them you mean in control of the prison, then yes, we certainly do." Scarface's scowl could have curdled milk. "They won't get out, not while I'm here." "That's what I'm afraid of," Oriental muttered, turning his attention back to the feeds. Outside, the battle was reaching a fever pitch. The inmates fought with the ferocity of people who knew they had nothing left to lose, each strike a testament to their desperation and newfound strength. And then, as quickly as it had started, the tide turned. The guards, overwhelmed and outmatched, began to retreat. It wasn't much, just a few steps, but it was enough. "We're pushing them back," Rax shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. "Keep it up," Lyra called, her eyes scanning the chaos for any sign of a trap, but there was none. And as the guards fell back, Lyra felt something she hadn't in a long time: hope. It was a fragile thing, easily broken, but it was there, a flicker in the darkness. "We might actually pull this off," Rax said, his tone both amazed and skeptical. Lyra gave a short laugh, her eyes never leaving the battlefield. "Don't jinx it." Gruff, still riding the high of his enhancements, was less restrained. "We're gonna make it, aren't we?" "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Lyra cautioned, though she couldn't deny the thrill that raced through her veins. As the guards retreated, the inmates regrouped, their victory bittersweet. It was a small win, but in a place like Bastion-7, even small wins were worth celebrating. Rax clapped Gruff on the shoulder, a rare smile on his face. "Good job, big guy," Gruff beamed, his grin as wide as a solar flare. "Told you I could take them." Lyra, however, was already planning their next move. The vulnerability in the parasites was a game changer, but they still had a long way to go. "We need to find a way to exploit this," she said, her mind racing with possibilities. "If we can control them, we can turn the tide for good. And get off this rock," Rax added, his voice tinged with longing. "Exactly," Lyra agreed, her eyes alight with determination. But even as they celebrated, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were living on borrowed time. The parasites were unpredictable and the guards were regrouping. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over. As they turned their attention back to the task at hand, Lyra felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't over, but for the first time they had a fighting chance. And in a place like Bastion-7, that was more than she could have hoped for. It was a new beginning of sorts. A chance to rewrite the rules, to break free from the chains that bound them. It wouldn't be easy, and the road ahead was fraught with danger, but it was a road nonetheless. With a final glance at the battlefield, Lyra led them forward, her heart set on freedom. They had a long way to go, but for the first time it felt like they were heading in the right direction. As they moved forward, the weight of their newfound hope hung in the air, a promise of things to come. It was a fragile thing, easily broken, but it was there, a flicker in the darkness, guiding them forward. And in a world as dark and unforgiving as Bastion-7, that flicker was everything. The lights flickered like they were auditioning for a horror movie, casting long shadows in the mess hall. Lyra Quell watched as the guards gathered their wits, or whatever passed for wits in their case, while the prisoners buzzed with the restless energy of a caged beast on the verge of something stupidly brave. She'd never been much of a leader, but desperation had a funny way of making you the speaker for the House of Crazy. "All right, listen up," Lyra barked, her voice cutting through the chaos like a knife through soggy bread. "We've got a shot at this, but it's gonna take all of us. So if you're not too busy contemplating your next life decision, pay attention." Rax Torin leaned against a table, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "And how exactly do you plan on getting us out of here, O fearless leader?" "Simple," Lyra replied with a grin that was all teeth and no joy. "We exploit the parasite's weakness." A murmur ran through the crowd, some looking hopeful, others skeptical. Gruff, their not too bright but very enthusiastic muscle, flexed his arms, causing his shirt to strain in protest. "I'm ready. Just point me at something I can hit." "Glad to see you're on board, Conan," Rax quipped. "But maybe let's save the smashing for when it counts, yeah?" Lyra continued. "These parasites are like every bad ex, you push them hard enough and they break. We just need to hit them in the soft spots. Coordinated attacks, use the environment, and for the love of whatever you hold dear, try not to die." "Sounds easy enough," Rax said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's plan B?" "We all just lay down and wait for the sweet release of death." "Optimism, Rax," Lyra shot back. "It's what keeps us going." He snorted. "Optimism's a luxury for people who aren't about to be stomped by riot boots." Meanwhile, Commander Jax Oriental lounged in the command center, watching the mayhem unfold on a dozen screens. The flickering feeds reminded him of his career, full of static and going nowhere fast. He pressed a button on his console, barking orders with the enthusiasm of a man being dragged to his own execution. "We're losing control, Scarface," he said, addressing his thug-like right hand. "I'd appreciate it if you'd stop admiring yourself in the mirror and do something about it." Scarface cracked his knuckles, a sound like bone on bone. "I'll handle it, boss. We'll crush them." "Like every great plan, yours inspires confidence," Oriental replied dryly. "Just remember, dead bodies don't pay taxes." Scarface grunted, which was probably the closest thing he got to an epiphany. Back in the mess hall, Lyra was organizing the inmates into a ragtag team of revolutionaries. It was like herding feral cats if those cats had a penchant for violence and parasite-enhanced strength. "Rax, you and Gruff take point," she ordered. "We need to punch through their lines. The rest of you follow their lead and hit them hard." "Just another day in paradise," Rax muttered, drawing a makeshift weapon from his belt, a pipe with delusions of grandeur. Gruff, ever the optimist, grinned as he took his position. "Let's make some noise." The guards, regrouping and visibly sweating behind their visors, awaited them. Their batons crackled with electric anticipation, the only thing standing between them and a very bad day. It was like watching two forces of nature collide, only with less poetry and more foul language. As the inmates charged, the clash was immediate and brutal. Gruff led the way, bulldozing through like a battering ram with feelings. Guards were sent sprawling, and the air was filled with the symphony of grunts, curses, and the crackle of electricity. "Keep pushing," Lyra shouted, ducking under a baton swing and delivering a kick that would have made her old gym teacher proud. Rax fought with a mix of agility and sarcasm, dodging blows with the kind of flair that suggested he enjoyed this a little too much. "Hey, watch the hair," he quipped, ducking a particularly vicious swing. The inmates, fueled by desperation and the promise of freedom, or at least a better cafeteria menu, fought with everything they had. It was chaos, pure and unfiltered, and Lyra was in the thick of it, her mind a blur of tactics and survival instincts. "Rax, left flank," she called, spotting a breach in the guard's line. "Got it," he replied, pivoting smoothly and leading a group of inmates into the fray. The guards, overwhelmed and outnumbered, continued to fall back, their formation crumbling like a poorly constructed soufflé. And for the first time, Lyra saw the possibility of victory, fragile and flickering, but they're all the same. In the command center, Oriental watched the situation deteriorate with the same enthusiasm one reserves for tax audits. "This wasn't the plan, Scarface," he said, his voice a study in irritation. Scarface, busy trying to look menacing, shrugged. "They're just getting lucky." "Luck is just a battlefield on which you're losing," Oriental replied, rubbing his temples like that would somehow make the problem disappear. Back in the mess hall, Lyra was catching her breath, the guards now on the defensive, their baton swings growing desperate and wild. Her mind raced, searching for the next step, the next advantage to press. "Lyra, what now?" Rax called, his voice cutting through the noise. She took a moment, weighing their options. "We keep the pressure up. They're on the ropes, we just need to finish it." "Always the optimist," Rax retorted, a grin splitting his face as he waded back into the melee. The battle was turning, the guards falling back with each passing minute. It wasn't victory yet, but it was a hell of a lot closer than they'd been 10 minutes ago. As the tide shifted, Lyra found herself shoulder to shoulder with Gruff, who was having the time of his life. "This is amazing," he yelled, swinging a guard by the arm like a particularly stubborn ragdoll. "Glad you're enjoying yourself," Lyra replied, slightly out of breath. "Just remember, we're not out of the woods yet." "Don't worry," Gruff said, flashing a grin. "I'm just getting warmed up." With their newfound strength and coordination, the inmates were pushing the guards back, edging closer to a win. Lyra could almost taste it, like the first sip of coffee after a long night. Then an unexpected lull, a brief pause as both sides regrouped. Lyra took the opportunity to reassess, the gears in her mind turning faster than a politician's excuses. "Okay, everyone, listen up," she shouted, rallying the inmates. "We've got them on the back foot. We just need one final push to break through." Rax, scanning the battlefield, nodded. "You heard the lady. Let's show them what happens when you back a rat into a corner." The inmates, fueled by the prospect of freedom, or just a better cell assignment, prepared for the final assault. It was do or die, and for once the odds weren't entirely against them. The guards, their lines thinning and their resolve faltering, dug in. It was make or break, and the air was charged with anticipation, the kind that makes your heart race and your palms sweat. "Ready?" Lyra asked, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. Rax flashed a grin. "Always." With a final rallying cry, the inmates surged forward, a wave of desperation and determination. It was chaos and violence, and yet beneath it all, a flicker of hope burned bright. Lyra at the helm felt the weight of their lives pressing in, the responsibility both terrifying and exhilarating. She'd never asked to lead, but sometimes life throws you into the deep end, and all you can do is hope you remembered how to swim. The final clash was a blur of fists, batons, and the unmistakable sound of bones meeting metal. It was brutal and messy, the kind of thing you'd rather forget but never will. And then, amid the chaos, a breakthrough. The guards, overwhelmed and outmaneuvered, began to crumble, their formation collapsing like a house of cards in a hurricane. It was the moment they'd been waiting for, the chance to push through and seize control. Lyra, fueled by adrenaline and a healthy dose of stubbornness, led the charge. The guards, sensing the shift, began to retreat in earnest, their resolve breaking like a brittle twig. "Push them back," she shouted, her voice carrying above the din. "We've got them on the run." The inmates, smelling victory like a predator on the hunt, surged forward, pressing their advantage. It was wild and reckless, but it was working, and Lyra couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at what they'd accomplished. Rax, fighting alongside her, flashed a grin that was all teeth and mischief. "Looks like we're actually pulling this off." "For now," Lyra replied, not daring to relax just yet. There was still work to be done, obstacles to overcome, but for the first time she felt like they were on the right path. As the guards retreated, leaving behind a trail of chaos and confusion, Lyra took a moment to catch her breath, the enormity of what they'd achieved starting to sink in. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but it was a start. In the command center, Oriental watched the defeat unfold with the resignation of a man whose life plan involved a lot more retirement beaches and a lot less prison riots. Scarface, I think it's time to reevaluate our strategy. Scarface, his bravado thoroughly deflated, could only nod. What now, boss? Oriental sighed, gazing at the screens with the fatigue of a man who's lived through one too many disasters. Now, we regroup, and hope to whatever damned deity's listening that we can turn this around before they figure out how to open the gates. Back in the mess hall, Lyra gathered her motley crew, the exhaustion of the battle tempered by the thrill of their success. They'd done the impossible, but there was no time to rest. The path to freedom was still littered with hurdles. "We did it," Gruff said, his voice filled with awe and a bit of disbelief. Rax clapped him on the back. "Yeah, big guy, we did. But don't go planning your victory speech just yet." Lyra, though weary, felt a flicker of determination reignite. They'd come this far, and she wasn't about to let it slip through her fingers. They had a chance, a real chance, and she'd be damned if she let it go to waste. "All right, everyone," she called, her voice strong despite the fatigue. "This isn't over. We've taken a big step, but there's more to do. Let's get organized, figure out our next move. We're not out of the woods yet." As they regrouped, Lyra felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, fear, hope, all swirling within her. It was a new beginning, a chance to change their fate, and she intended to see it through. The battle for Bastion-7 wasn't over, but for the first time, it felt like they had a fighting chance. And in a place as dark and unforgiving as this, that flicker of hope was everything. Lyra Quell stood amid the chaos in Bastion-7, the grim satisfaction of a battle inching towards victory flickering in her eyes. Around her, the inmates regrouped, their breath coming in ragged gasps, eyes wild with the primal thrill of rebellion. The guards' retreat had been haphazard, a half-hearted dash for safety that left Lyra with a fleeting sense of triumph. Rax Torrens sidled up to her, blood trickling from a cut above his eyebrow. "Not bad for a motley crew of prisoners and mad scientists, huh?" he quipped, wiping the blood with the back of his hand like it was just another Tuesday. Lyra smirked, her chest heaving. "Yeah, but let's not start ordering the victory champagne just yet. We still have to figure out how to open those damned gates. Preferably without blowing us all to kingdom come." Gruff, looming nearby like a particularly dim star, was all grins. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? We just keep smashing." "Sure, Gruff," Lyra replied, patting his shoulder with mock reassurance. "But maybe save the smashing for when we actually need it." The mess hall was a mess, fitting, given its name, and Lyra scanned the room, calculating their next move. They couldn't keep pressing forward without a plan, lest they end up on the wrong end of a stunned baton, or worse, under the boot of a regrouped and angry command center. "We need to shut down their comms," Lyra said, thinking aloud. "Keep them from calling in reinforcements or, airstrikes." Rax grinned, a devilish shine in his eyes. "Lucky for you, I happen to know my way around a console. Enough to cause a little digital mayhem, at least." "Of course you do," Lyra muttered, shaking her head. "What's the plan then, oh master hacker?" "Simple. I get to the command center, play with some buttons, and hope I don't accidentally set off the auto-destruct." Gruff's eyes widened. "We have one of those, probably," Rax shrugged. "You know how these military types are paranoid as hell. But it's a risk we're gonna have to take." "Great," Lyra said, her voice dripping with irony. "Nothing like a plan that involves not dying horribly as its main objective." Nearby, the guards' abandoned stun batons still crackled menacingly on the floor, and Lyra picked one up, feeling its weight. "These might come in handy," she mused, tossing one to Gruff, who caught it with the slow reflexes of a man who'd spent too many years punching things. "All right," Lyra continued, her voice firm despite the swirling chaos. "Rax, you handle the tech. Gruff and I will keep their attention on us." hit and run guerrilla style, like we're the universe's most annoying mosquitoes. Rax gave a lazy salute. Nothing I like more than making life a living hell for people in positions of power. Go, then, Lyra said, giving him a nudge. We'll keep them busy. As Rax disappeared into the corridors like a shadow with a vendetta, Lyra turned to Gruff. Let's give them a reason to regret underestimating us. Gruff's grin was all teeth and enthusiasm. You got it, boss. The two of them moved with purpose, the mess hall transforming into a chaotic dance floor of desperation and defiance. Inmates rallied around them, the promise of an uprising turning them from captives into a force to be reckoned with. In the command center, Commander Jax Oriental watched the monitors with the kind of expression one reserves for discovering mold in their bread. Scarface stood beside him, trying futilely to appear competent. They're regrouping, Scarface pointed out, as if Oriental couldn't see the obvious. No shit, Oriental snapped, rubbing the bridge of his nose. We need a contingency plan, something to put these upstarts back in their place. Scarface shifted uncomfortably, his bravado slipping. We could, turn off the lights, maybe confuse them, Oriental sighed deeply. The lights? Really? I'd like to not make us look like complete idiots, thank you. Back in the corridors, Lyra and Gruff spearheaded the chaos, darting in and out of sight, striking at guards who were too slow or too stupid to stay out of their way. Each blow was a message, a warning that the balance of power was shifting. Think they're getting the hint? Gruff asked, his voice carrying over the din of their assault. Lyra chuckled darkly. If they aren't, they're dumber than they look, and that's saying something. Meanwhile, Rax was making his way through the labyrinthine innards of Bastion-7, the hum of the ship's systems his only companion. The command center loomed ahead, a fortress of controls and screens that seemed impossibly daunting. But then, he was the kind of guy who found fun in chaos. Inside, Oriental was pacing like a caged tiger, his frustration mounting with every passing moment. The prisoners had become more than just a nuisance. They were a full-blown threat. All right, Oriental barked. I want every available guard on high alert. We need to lock this place down tighter than a miser's wallet. Scarface nodded, lumbering off to relay the orders, leaving Oriental alone with his thoughts and a growing sense of impending disaster. Rax slinked into the command center, sticking to the shadows until he found a suitable console. His fingers danced over the keys, navigating the system with the reckless precision of someone who had spent far too many hours figuring out how to cheat at poker on digital platforms. Let's see, he muttered to himself. Comms. Where's the damn comms shutdown? He found it, buried under layers of bureaucratic nonsense, and with a final, decisive keystroke, he severed the command center's ability to communicate with the outside world. The fortress was now an island, isolated in the sea of space, with its inhabitants blissfully unaware of just how royally screwed they were. Back in the mess hall, Lyra felt a shift in the air. The guards' confidence was waning, their movements less assured. They were starting to realize that the tide had turned and not in their favor. Keep it up, Lyra shouted, her voice carrying above the fray. They are on the ropes. The inmates responded with renewed vigor, their makeshift weapons and stolen batons a blur of defiance and desperation. Each strike, each duck and weave, was a reminder that they were more than just prisoners, they were survivors. Gruff, wielding his baton like a conductor of chaos, let out a triumphant roar. We're doing it, Lyra, we're really doing it. Don't jinx it, she shot back, but the corners of her mouth twitched upwards. In grim places like this, any glimmer of hope was worth holding onto. Rax emerged from the shadows, a cocky grin plastered across his face. Comms are down. They're flying blind. Lyra let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Good. Now we just need to keep the pressure up. Make them so damned nervous they trip over their own feet. As the battle raged on, it was clear that the inmates were gaining ground. The guards' disciplined lines were fracturing, their resolve crumbling under the relentless assault. Every time a baton crackled or a fist connected, the message was clear. This wasn't just a riot, it was a reckoning. Oriental, watching from the command center, was running out of options. His plan to keep the prisoners cowed and contained was unraveling faster than a cheap sweater, and desperation gnawed at his gut. "Scarface," he barked, summoning his lieutenant with a voice that brooked no argument. Scarface returned, his confidence now as scuffed as his boots. "Yes, boss. We need to take back control," Oriental said, his gaze fixed on the monitors. "Round up every last guard and hit them hard. We can't let them reach the main gates." Scarface nodded, a hint of determination igniting in his eyes. Understood. But it was too late. The momentum had shifted, and the prisoners were riding the wave of rebellion with reckless abandon. Lyra, leading another charge with the precision of a general and the fury of a cornered beast, capitalized on their advantage. Every step forward was a victory, every fallen guard a testament to their newfound power. Beside her, Rax was a blur of movement and sarcasm, his voice cutting through the chaos like a knife. "You know," he quipped between blows, "I never thought I'd see the day I'd be storming a prison. From the inside. Twice." "Funny how life turns out," Lyra replied, her tone as dry as the Martian desert they'd never see again. Gruff, ever the enthusiastic juggernaut, was in his element, dispatching guards with the unrefined grace of a wrecking ball. "They're falling back," he yelled, barely pausing to breathe between swings. Lyra could see it too. The guards were losing their nerve, their retreat becoming a full-blown rout. It was intoxicating, this feeling of triumph, and yet beneath it lay the cold reality that their fight was far from over. As the guards scattered, Lyra took stock of her ragtag crew. They were battered and bruised but undeterred. The battle had taken its toll, but she could see in their eyes a grim determination that matched her own. "All right," she called, her voice cutting through the aftermath like a comet through the void. "We've got them running scared, but we need to keep moving. The main gates are our only way out." Rax, leaning on a piece of wreckage for support, gave her a weary grin. "I don't know about you, but I didn't come this far to die in this metal coffin." "No, we didn't," Lyra agreed, her gaze sweeping over the faces of those around her. "We came here to live." With a renewed sense of purpose, the inmates regrouped, their eyes set on the path ahead. The battle for Bastion-7 was far from over, but for the first time, Lyra allowed herself a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a shot at freedom after all. Bastion-7 was now as lively as a starved tiger let loose in a meat market. The place wasn't a prison anymore, not by a long shot. No, it was more like a school for wayward adults on the edge of the galaxy, hosted by Dr. Lyra quelled herself. The guards had been routed, the command center was on a forced vacation from reality, and the inmates were the ones calling the shots now. Lyra stood amidst the chaos, looking like a queen surveying her newly acquired kingdom of misfits and malcontents. "All right, listen up," she shouted, her voice cutting through the din like a razor through cheap fabric. "We didn't bust our asses just to sit on them now. We've taken the place, but holding it is another story." Gruff, his enthusiasm as boundless as his appetite, puffed out his chest. "Let him come. We'll knock him back on their asses again." Rax, leaning on a console with a freshly won air of swagger, chimed in. "Yeah, well, let's try not to get too comfortable. We've still got a universe out there that thinks we're the bad guys." "Rax is right," Lyra agreed, tossing a glance that was equal parts admiration and "I'll kick your ass if you screw this up again." "We need a plan, something that doesn't involve us getting blasted into stardust once the cavalry arrives." Gruff frowned, which was about as common as a comet passing through your living room. "You think they'll send reinforcements?" "No if about it," Rax replied, his tone as dry as a Martian sandstorm. "We're not exactly the kind of guests you want overstaying their welcome." "True enough," Lyra said, her mind a whirl of possibilities. "We've got two things going for us, the parasites and the fact that we control the narrative now. We use them both, and we might just walk out of here with our skins intact." The mention of parasites had the usual effect: uneasy glances, a chorus of grumbles, and the occasional brave soul trying to hide their twitching. After all, Nothing screams comfort like the idea of a symbiotic alien worm setting up shop in your innards. Lyra, always the pragmatist, soldiered on. Look, I know the idea of parasites isn't exactly your idea of a weekend getaway, but it's what we've got. It's a power we can harness, maybe even control. And if we can show the world that, we might have a chance at more than just survival. We might change the game entirely. Gruff, ever the straightforward thinker, scratched his chin. So, what you're saying is we use these things against the people who want to throw us back into our cages. Exactly, Lyra nodded, her eyes gleaming with the kind of resolve that only comes from being really ticked off at being underestimated one too many times. We show them that humanity's not done evolving yet, and that we're not going to just lie down and die. Rax, ever the voice of sarcastic reason, folded his arms. Great speech, boss, but how exactly do we sell superhuman convulsions for the betterment of mankind to the folks upstairs? We don't, Lyra replied simply. We show them. We take this show on the road and we don't just fight for us. We fight for anyone who's ever been told they're less than what they are. Gruff grinned, his enthusiasm infectious. I like it. Let's turn this prison into a launching pad. But it wasn't all sunshine and revolutions. They had the place, sure, but holding it would be like juggling plasma grenades. You might keep it up for a while, but eventually something's bound to blow up in your face. Scarface, licking his wounds and his pride in some dim corner, nursed a grudge that could fill the void of space. He wasn't the sharpest tool in the shed, but he knew enough to understand that if he didn't act fast, his career prospects were looking about as bright as a black hole. In the meantime, the command center was a buzz of activity. Rax had appointed himself as the unofficial tech wizard of their newfound fiefdom. He fiddled with the controls, keeping the place dark and the comms down, all while muttering a litany of complaints that would have put a seasoned pirate to shame. "How's it looking?" Lyra asked, appearing beside him like a ghost with a vendetta. Rax didn't look up from the mess of wires and screens. "Oh, could be worse. Could be better. Right now, we're a floating tin can with illusions of grandeur. Nice to see your optimism still intact," she quipped. "Hey, someone's gotta play the pessimist. Keeps things balanced," he shot back, flashing her a grin that was equal parts charm and challenge. Lyra shook her head, a small smile tugging at her lips despite the situation. "Keep working on those systems. We need to be ready for whatever they throw at us." "You got it, boss. Just promise me one thing. When this is all over, we take a nice long vacation on some beach planet. Preferably one without extradition treaties." "Deal," Lyra laughed, a sound that was rare and precious in the grim confines of Bastion-7. As the hours ticked by, the inmates settled into their new roles. They didn't have much choice. It was either adapt or get left behind. The parasites, once a fearsome unknown, had become their allies, each inmate finding a different way to harness the newfound strength, even if it meant the occasional embarrassing spaz out. Dr. Lyra Quell, ever the visionary, began to see the potential for something more. They were no longer just prisoners, they were pioneers. And while most of the galaxy might not see it that way, she knew they were on the cusp of something revolutionary. Commander Jax Oriental, meanwhile, was having a hell of a time trying to save face. His once tightly run ship was now a free-for-all, and he couldn't decide what was worse, the fact that he'd lost control, or the fact that Lyra Quell had been right under his nose the entire time. Scarface returned, looking like he'd been contemplating the meaning of life and found it wanting. "Boss, we're not getting anywhere just sitting around. We need to do something." Oriental, frustration etched into every line of his face, nodded. "You're right. We've got to get back in there, take control. But we can't just barge in guns blazing. We need a strategy." "Well, how about we try talking to them?" Scarface suggested, surprising himself with the notion. Oriental arched an eyebrow. "Talk to them? And what do you propose we say? Hey guys, mind giving us back our prison?" Scarface shrugged, a muscle-bound Atlas with the weight of the world on his scarred shoulders. "Worth a shot." Besides, we might find out what they are really after. And so, with a heavy heart and an even heavier ego, Oriental and his men prepared for a parley, hoping that words might succeed where brute force had failed. Back in the heart of Bastion-7, Lyra was rallying her troops, preparing them for the inevitable confrontation. The place was a powder keg, and it wouldn't take much to blow it sky high. Gruff, ever the optimist, grinned at his comrades. Bet they're pissing themselves at the thought of facing us again. Let's hope so, Rax chimed in, leaning against a console with all the casual disdain of a cat on a hot tin roof. But just in case, let's be ready for anything. Lyra nodded, her mind a whirl of plans and contingencies. Whatever happens, we stick together. We're not just fighting for ourselves. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been trapped in a place like this. As the guards approached, a tense silence fell over the inmates, each one steeling themselves for what was to come. Lyra stepped forward, her presence a beacon of defiance in the dimly lit corridor. Commander Oriental, flanked by Scarface and a small contingent of guards, stopped a few paces away, his face a mask of forced diplomacy. "Doctor." "Quell, Commander Oriental," she replied, her tone as sharp as a freshly honed blade. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" Oriental cleared his throat, trying to muster some semblance of authority. "I'm here to discuss terms." "Terms?" Lyra echoed, arching an eyebrow. "Seems to me we've already set the terms. You're just here to accept them." Scarface, sensing the tension building to a breaking point, stepped forward. "Look, we don't need to keep fighting. We can work something out." "And what exactly do you propose?" Rax asked, his voice dripping with cynicism. Oriental hesitated, knowing that the next words out of his mouth could very well seal his fate. "A truce. We stand down, you stand down. We can work on getting the comms back up, get this sorted out." It was a gamble, pure and simple. Oriental was banking on the hope that Lyra was more reasonable than the circumstances suggested. Lyra considered the offer, her mind racing through the possibilities. A truce would buy them time, but it could also be a trap. Then again, when had they ever had the luxury of playing it safe? "All right," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken challenges. "We'll agree to a truce. But remember this, we're not going back to the way things were. We're done being your pawns." A murmur of agreement swept through the gathered inmates, their resolve solidifying like iron under a blacksmith's hammer. "Agreed," Oriental replied, relief washing over his features. "Let's see if we can't find a way out of this mess together." And just like that, the stalemate began. As the two sides retreated to their respective corners, Lyra knew that this was just the beginning. They'd taken Bastion-7, but maintaining control would be a whole different beast. Still, they had come this far, and if there was one thing she was certain of, it was that humanity wasn't done fighting, not by a long shot. In the midst of uncertainty and chaos, one thing was clear. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for a future, and they'd be damned if they let anyone take it away from them.